Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My name is Gabe. This is my dad, David, and we are here today to talk about a really interesting conversation surrounding some different things with church, with a relationship with Jesus, and really surrounding around unity. So a little bit of background here. I'm a Gen Z Baptist. My dad is a baby boomer Catholic, and we're going to have a conversation surrounding that and really focus on what unity and just the focus on Jesus can offer that. And so I'll pass it over to my dad to talk a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting topic because being a baby boomer Catholic, being raised in the Catholic Church, I was brought up in a generation that was very obligatory. Everything was really focused on performance, what we needed to do in order to perform as a God-fearing person. And when I say God-fearing, fear was not from a standpoint of being fearful of God just because of who he was, but being scared to death of God because of what he might do to me if I don't perform well. And that was driven into us. I was brought up into a very loving family, very church oriented. It was not a decision that, well, are we going to church on Sunday? It was you were going to church on Sunday. You got up and you got dressed. And we had beautiful parents. I had some beautiful siblings. We were never really introduced to the love of God, even from the pulpit standpoint. It was more of a fear-driven, obligation-oriented relationship. I don't even know if I could even use the word relationship because it was just very performance-oriented, and you really didn't see the problem in that because you were being brought up in it. You didn't see the problem because it was the way it was being taught to us. The church does a very good job of teaching people how to do things. We just lack on talking about the relationship. And I think that that's very comfortable sometimes for the pulpit because it's easier just to teach people than to try to introduce people to this beautiful Messiah that we have, this beautiful Christ in Jesus that welcomes us with just open arms and just wants to love us and reveal the Father to us. And you can't experience that when you're worried about the things that you have to do and get right, because the way we were brought up, it was almost as though there was a God in heaven that was a God of retribution instead of a God of restoration. And until you enter into that relationship with the Lord, until you experience his amazing love, you can't discover your true identity in Christ. And if you can't discover your true identity in Christ, then the evil of this world that lurks this world, that seeks to destroy, can destroy your destiny that God has for you. And I hope that in my sharing about discovering this great love that God the Father, my daddy in heaven, has had for me and revealed to me, that began to allow me to see not only him, but to see myself as he saw me. Instead of as the world was trying to tell me I needed to see myself.
Yeah, and it's, as you all can tell, with this podcast, it's definitely born out of something that we're both very passionate about, and it's something we care very deeply about. And it's real faith, it's real conversations, it's about the unity that we can have in the church. As you've really just already seen, we come from very different generations. We come from a very different church background, and truthfully, we don't agree on everything. No one's ever going to 100% agree on everything, but we both believe that Jesus is so much bigger than our labels, bigger than our upbringings, bigger than even our traditions. And so as we look into it, the world doesn't need more religious talk.
No, it doesn't. And Gabe, not to interrupt you, but I hope that this podcast, because I'm very, the spirit of ecumenism is so alive in me. My heart is filled with an ecumenical approach to everything. I hope from this podcast that we can begin to see our churches come together and stop drawing the lines in the sand saying, this is where I draw the line. Mm-hmm. Because when we draw the lines, I want to say, we're telling God, you can't do nothing here. This is where I'm going to draw the line. And I think that's where a lot of people are scared. I think that's where the pulpit's scared. I think that's where people are scared. They're scared to death to say to the Spirit, you know what, I'm ready to step out to the unknown. And the reason they're scared is because they may not have an answer when the Spirit of God does something. I'm not worried about having an answer. I just want to step out there.
And that's a good point, because it's one of the things that we've talked about with this podcast. It's not going to be a churchy podcast.
Nope.
It's not going to be fake. It's not going to be, performative by any means. We're not here to impress anybody,
No.
to gain an audience. None of that. It's just to have those real conversations and to focus on the relationship with Jesus. Focus on that church unity and just focus on those things that people are really wrestling with nowadays.
And there's so many people that are wrestling with it. I'm blessed to be a lay evangelist in the Catholic Church. I've spoken in other denominations as well. And I was it's so funny we started this conversation, this podcast today, because just about maybe an hour ago, I was talking to a young man, beautiful young man, has a wife and 3 wonderful kids. He's in his 30s. And I was, he's like, he could sense something different about me. And it kind of opened up a conversation. And I just looked at him and I said, we're having this conversation right now. God ordained this time. And I started trying to talk to him about this, the relationship with God and how God just loves him so much. And the first thing he says, as everybody does, is, well, what church you go to? And I'm not ashamed of who I am. It's just, what difference does it make? Because I want them to just find their own way to a church where they find peace. And I was like, well, I go to St. Joseph here. I usually go to St. Joseph Catholic Church at 8 o'clock Mass. And then I go to 11 o'clock Mass. 11 o'clock church service at the Baptist Church in Ponchatoula, because my kids are there, my family's there, my grandkids are there, my son-in-laws, my daughter-in-law, because I want to be with them. And he stopped me, he says, we tried to, I'm not going to say what church it was because it doesn't matter, because that's me drawing a line, and I don't draw lines anymore. He said, we went to this church in, this particular place, and, the thing about when I go to church is I feel like it's full of hypocrites. And you know what?
You're right, it is.
He's right. I mean, they look at these people coming in, and they may not be dressed the same. They may have a tattoo or 2 or 3 or 4. And what happens? They start looking down their nose at them instead of caring about them. And I hope that this podcast, I'm sorry, I am as real as they come. I mean, people don't like me because they can't label me. But I hope this podcast can help people begin to see that God wants us to care and love everybody he brings into our presence. Mm-hmm. Because if you're familiar with Jesus, you're going to love. You're not going to judge. If you're not familiar with Jesus, God help you. That the true sign of that is your judgmental ways and your unloving ways.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Me being in this generation and having a lot of conversation with peers, it's a lot of people that go to church, grew up around church. Dad might be a pastor or very involved with the church. We all say the same things of how sometimes we can't stand going to church because it seems like I got to put on my fake front to go talk to someone who's putting on their fake front. Yeah. And there's no real intimacy, real connection there. Because it is true, we are all hypocrites. But it just seems like church used to be one of those things that, we got to look a certain way, we got to act a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the things coming down now, especially with my generation, is that we want real, we want honest. Let's put down all those walls. We're all sinners saved by grace. Yeah. And so, kind of tying into it within the modern church, with what you've seen. Almost 60 years old. You are 60 now.
60 years old.
You've been on this earth for a while. I hate using the word concerns, but what are some different things that you see with our modern church that could change?
Well, the biggest fault of Christianity, I'm not going to say any denomination, but the biggest fault of Christianity is we've made it a Sunday thing. Yeah. And it's not a Sunday thing. Mm. On Sunday, when I go to church, I'm going to take it from a Catholic perspective for just a minute. When I go to church as a Catholic, as a Christian in the Catholic Church, and I'm celebrating there, I go there because, first of all, I go there because I want to be close to my God, my Lord. I want to be close to Him. And the second thing the reason I go is because And going in there and being in his presence, I want to give a little bit more of myself up so that he can begin to really dwell inside of me, make me, create in me the vessel that he needs me to be so he can fill me with his grace so I can pour it out on those I come in contact with. But the reason as from a Catholic standpoint, when I go in there and I receive the body of Christ, the Eucharist, I become a tabernacle. It begins when I walk out the doors. But so many of us forfeit the grace we've just received before we get out of the parking lot because we cussing the person that pulled out in front of us. You know, one of the things that it's the craziest thing that I see now, and this may sound silly to you all, and I don't care. When did we start backing up into the parking lots and the parking spaces at the parking lots at church? When did we start backing up? Is it because you're in such a hurry to get away? Think about it, Gabe. Every time I went to church, everybody just pulled into the parking place. Now, there may be one or two of us that pull into it now. Everybody backs in. It's like, man, when I get to that car, I got to get out of here. I mean, are we going to be real? You know, it's really sad that we're in such a hurry to get away from him. Hey, pastor or priest, you got 45 minutes to an hour, and that's it. What if God's trying to move? What if God's trying to move through this man of God because he has a message for us? And it just breaks my heart how it's just this Sunday thing. You got 45 minutes to an hour. Are you kidding me? How many of your marriages would last if all you did was spend an hour on Sunday morning with your spouse? Every other day, you never spoke a word to her. You got up, you went to work, or him. You got up, you went to work, you came home, you ate, you bathed, you went to bed. You didn't say one word until Sunday morning. Let's have breakfast together. And you had breakfast together for an hour, and then it was all on you then. And you just spent your time all by yourself. How many relationships would last like that? But that's what we've made Christianity. It's a Sunday thing. And maybe some of them will show up on Wednesday night, you know? Maybe some of them will show up to the extra things we try to do, the renewals, revivals, missions, whatever you want to call them. When I started going to churches back in, my first time I preached in a church was in 2005. And it was amazing because the church was full. There was over 300 people there. For 3 nights, I sat there and preached. Didn't know what I was doing, but God knew what he was doing. I go to a place now and we're lucky to have 120, 130 people. Because it's just, we've lost the desire to get closer to him. And in their opinion, I went to church on Sunday. That was it. Now I'm going to live my life. And because that's how we've adapted ourselves, it's affecting your generation because your generation knows there's more. Your generation knows there's something missing. The missing key that they don't know what it is the joy and love that Jesus brings in their life. And my generation isn't showing y'all that because we're looking down our nose saying, you're doing it wrong. None of us have the patent. None of us knows how to do it right. We just have to trust him.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, you kind of covered a lot in that is with our generation looking, we don't want just another event. It's not an event for event's sake. There's no transformation.
No.
And I think a lot of it, I include myself into this, obviously, is, we looked to our parents, to older generations, and it was, hey, you went to church on Sunday, you lived like the world the rest of the week. We just forfeited, let's just not go to church on Sunday. What difference is it making? And I think that's really kind of gotten to the cultivation of where we are. But now my generation, you look at it and it's like, okay, well, we missed the boat somewhere.
Yeah.
This life isn't what we thought it was going to be, and it's turning every which way to go. And it really, truthfully, does seem like the church almost turns us away half the time,
right.
Because it's this old mold. Hey, you need to fit in like this. You need to look like this. And it's a new day. And I've been saying that God's doing something new. He always is.
Yeah.
And so, kind of with that, what do you think are those faith conversations that my generation and still even your generation really needs to hear?
Well, I think they need to hear the truth be told from a person in my generation, like their faith story. That's what the works of our faith are supposed to be. We want to talk about works. It ain't the works that we think we're supposed to be doing. The works that we're supposed to be doing is sharing our faith with one another. Mm-hmm. Because for 30 years, because it was in 1996 when I discovered the love that God had for me. I discovered my identity. And in discovering that, I began to see God didn't tell me, David, you need to quit doing this, 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 and this. He just said, David, I love you, and I wouldn't change nothing about you. And when you discover that identity that God has for us, it changes your life. He never tells you what you need to get rid of. You just automatically begin to rid yourself of the sinfulness that's there. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, it cleans you up. It's hard sometimes because people you think are really your friends don't care for you anymore because you're not the same person that you were, which is okay. But when you have that love of God, when you have that familiar sense of who Jesus is, when you have that intimacy with him, you begin to share it with people, sometimes not by words, just by your presence there, because your presence represents the presence of Jesus Christ. And when you bring joy to that person, when you look at that person with a smile on your face, with love in your heart for them, they can feel that warmth. You may not speak a word to them, but they can feel it.
Yeah.
But when you look at them with disdain, and you look at them with a frown on your face, or a little turn in your head because they may look a little different than you, you're pushing that person away. And I think that's the deception that the evil of this world has put on so many people. We should be out there doing the work that the father of the prodigal son was doing, trying to robe them, put a ring on their finger and sandals on their feet, make them feel wanted, make them feel like they belong.
Yeah.
Because they do belong.
Yeah, there's this expression I've heard a long, long time ago on social media. I know you're not familiar with that platform.
Nope.
But he had said, when you take a shower, you don't clean up before you take a shower. The shower is what cleanses you. But all too often when it comes to the church, when it comes to the things of faith, it's no, clean yourself up before you enter in. And it's, to a form, we take this legalistic approach to it of, you need to do X, Y, and Z before you come in. And Jesus is like, no, you just come.
You just come.
And as you walk with Jesus, as he reveals things to you, things will just fall off your life.
Right. And I know tonight's not the night for me to share my testimony. I'm sure at some podcast I'll share my testimony. But that was the incredible thing about what happened to me in 1996. When for the first time in my life, I recognized God being right here. Mm-hmm. That manipulated side of religion, what man was telling me, heaping guilt and shame on me. I felt so nasty. I felt so unworthy that God was right here. Mm. I was like, how can you be right here, God, with this sinfulness? The words of God to David Peavy were, David, I love you. There is nothing I would change about you. What? You see, God sees us just like he created us. He doesn't see us in our sinful state. He sees us as the perfect creation we are. And until you can see yourself that way, how can you share that with other people? If you're weighed down with the shackles of sin and guilt and shame, I'll say this tonight, and I think it needs to be said. I was speaking with 3 pastors the other day. And I said to them, to all 3 of them, these are ordained men, 1 priest and 2 ministers. And I said, the sad part about it, y'all? I said, let me just tell you the truth. The Catholic Church didn't care about me. The Catholic Church didn't care about me because I wasn't raising my kids in the Catholic Church. My wife wasn't Catholic. I wasn't married in the Catholic Church. All they were telling me was how wrong I was. The Baptist Church didn't care about me because all they were telling me was I was going to die and go to hell. Because I hadn't walked up their aisle and accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I'm sitting there going, I'm going to 2 different churches and I'm like, where's the love? Where's the compassion? Where's the peace that I'm supposed to be hearing about? Mm. And that's when God showed up and said, David, I care about you. And from that moment forward, I quit worrying about what others thought or worrying about whether, because I had the caring and the love of God, my Father in heaven. And since that day, all I want to do is make sure the people I come in contact with feel that same love. Even if it's not by a word I speak, but by the smile on my face.
And it kind of goes back, there's this authenticity that comes with it. You found the authentic love that came from
Absolutely.
God. Now you can authentically give that love out, and that's a big sticking point with my generation specifically. I think it's a big just sticking point for a lot of people, but we're not really authentic much.
No, we're not.
The church isn't really authentic, and there's a big disconnect. And authenticity is so important to us because we look up to other people and we go, "Wow, your life looks like this. Your words aren't matching your life. What's the disconnect here?" Right? Now, social media is the one thing that it fools all of us. We look at social media, we think that is real. Like still can't figure that out. If anybody has any suggestions on that, I don't get. But when it comes to the things of God, the church, all of these, we really look and we call out fakes. Can you speak into that a little bit?
Well, we're too busy trying to train people. It's the pulpit loves just to train people because it's easy that way. I can train you and then I can go do what I want to do. If the pulpit was more worried about bringing people to that faith, you see, what happened to me in 1996 in discovering that amazing love that God had for me and helping from God's help and grace and mercy, discovering my identity, I understood who I was. But when I discovered who I was, I got to begin to understand and see the beauty of my church. I got to see the beauty of the traditions of my church. I got to see, because I was going with my wife and my kids at the Baptist, I got to see the beautiful things of the Baptist church. My eyes were open to see the beauty of it. You know what I'm saying? But you can't see the beauty of it if your relationship is performance oriented. Because in performance, your focus is on what you're doing instead of the relationship of love that reciprocates between you and the Father. Does that make sense? When it's performance oriented, all I'm worried about at the end of the day, did I perform well? Did I fulfill all the things that God had for me to do? Do you really think it matters? Do you really think it matters? Yeah, I think back, I was doing a book study this morning, and I said, when Jesus went by the pool that all those crippled people were around, there was a man there that was an invalid for 38 years. 38 years he sat there. And Jesus looked at him and says, "Do you want to be healed?" Yep. He says, "But I can't get to the water." He said, "Roll up your mat. Go." He didn't do nothing. The most amazing thing is he didn't know who Jesus was. And when the Pharisees, those religious people, the smart ones, not a dummy like me, but the smart ones, "What you doing carrying that mat today?" Ain't that what we do, people in the church today? What you doing carrying your mat? What are you doing with that rolled up carrying it? Well, the man who healed me told me. Who healed you? I don't know. Jesus sought him out, didn't he? That's when he discovered he was Jesus. It was Jesus that healed him. And what did he do? He went right back to those smart people and said, "Oh, it was Jesus. It was Jesus." He didn't do nothing. He didn't do nothing. But the underlying statement in there is the religious ones wanted to condemn him for the miracle that took place in his life instead of welcoming him. Why aren't we welcoming people? Huh?
Yeah, it's a good point, and we're kind of getting close on time here. One of the big things I do want to talk about before we close out on this podcast, the denominational walls that we put up, these lines in the sand that we draw. From a father's perspective, speak intuitive. You have people in my generation that they've walked away from the church completely. You have some that didn't walk away from the church; they just walked away from a specific denomination, but are practicing in that. What are your thoughts on that? Any words or just?
Well, what I'm hoping takes place from this podcast is that we keep diving deeper in, and we begin to look at our similarities rather than our differences. Because the differences, when we focus on our differences, that's what drives people away. Your generation is sick and tired of denominations, the inner fighting that's going on between denominations. They're tired of it. Yeah. And what God has begun in Ponchatoula with faith sharing ministries, he has begun to bring the churches together. And that's a beautiful thing. And we're looking more at our similarities rather than our differences. What do we share in common? We share a God who loves us, who sent his son to die for us. And that's what's important. And if we begin to do that, we'll begin to see our children, those who have left, come back, because they're not going to see the fighting. They're going to see the communion that we share with one another, because it's all about coming around the table and breaking bread. And I pray that this podcast will encourage more people to come around that table and break bread. And what does Jesus say? Do this as often as you can in what? Remembrance of me. Mm-hmm. If we could remember Jesus in our lives more daily, this world would be a better place. And I pray that this podcast will begin to do that. I do.
Awesome. Well, look, guys, we appreciate you joining. If this conversation is something that, just resonates with you, whether you're old, young, Catholic, Baptist, somewhere in between, skeptical, committed, we hope you just keep listening. The goal of this is just really simple. Honest conversations, telling real stories, and just all in a deeper pursuit of Jesus and unity amongst us believers. So we're glad you're here, and see you next time.